After 14 years of marriage, I secretly heard my wife tell her friend on phone that my 2 kids are not mine but for her real lover. She said, he actually thinks those kids are his. Can you imagine? 14 years, and he still has no idea. Eric and I say it all the time, he's the perfect fool. I was very shattered. So I started preparing for her big day. Hello. Thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It would be great if you can also comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today, our special shout out goes to Jack Stone from Ohio. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's dive into the details of today's story. I wasn't supposed to be home that early. My meeting with a supplier got rescheduled last minute, so I took the chance to grab Melissa's favorite coffee on my way back. Some overly complicated caramel espresso she always insisted only tasted right from one place across town. Maybe I just wanted to surprise her. Maybe I wanted to see her smile without asking for it. 14 years of marriage teaches you a few things: when to speak, when to be silent, and when a gesture means more than 100 words. I pulled into the driveway, silence wrapping around me like a warning. I didn't think much of it at first. The house was too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the sort that holds its breath. I stepped inside and paused, hearing faint laughter. I smiled instinctively. It was Melissa's voice. I moved slower, coffee still in hand, not wanting to ruin the surprise. That's when I heard her. He actually thinks those kids are his. Can you imagine? 14 years, and he still has no idea. Eric and I say it all the time. He's the perfect fool. My breath stopped. My feet froze in place as if the air itself had become concrete. My heart didn't pound. It dropped. My hands trembled. The hot coffee dripped from the cup, scalding my wrist, but I didn't feel it. I stood there, behind the wall, listening as the woman I devoted my life to laughed at me like a running joke. She kept talking, unaware of how close I was. No, I don't feel bad. He was always busy building that business. He missed the signs. Besides, the kids look enough like him to pass. And Eric, he's always been the one. Always. The cup fell from my hand and shattered. Not loud enough to alert her, but enough to mark the moment when something in me broke too. I backed out slowly, every cell in my body screaming for answers, for justice, for a confrontation. But instead, I did something even harder. I stayed silent. I cleaned up the coffee, wiped my wrist, and walked into the kitchen like I'd just arrived from a long day at work. She smiled at me. The same smile I'd memorized over the years. The one that once made me feel like the luckiest man alive. Hey, you're early. She chirped, planting a kiss on my cheek. Everything okay? I nodded. I asked about the kids. She said they were out with her mom. I told her I brought her favorite coffee, but I dropped it like an idiot in the hallway. She chuckled and teased me. I laughed too. Not because it was funny, but because I knew something she didn't. The game had changed. I wasn't her fool anymore. I was her shadow now. And shadows watch. Shadows wait. That night, I sat in my home office and stared at the family photos on my shelf. 2 smiling kids. Melissa with her head against my shoulder. Me, the proud father, the loving husband. But now the smiles looked staged. The colors felt off. I stared long and hard until the faces became strangers. I opened a new tab and searched for private DNA testing services. I called one. They said results could take a week. I arranged for a kit to be mailed discreetly under a friend's name. Then I called a private investigator, someone I'd used once during a business merger. I told him I needed to know everything about my wife's day-to-day life quietly, without tipping her off. He agreed, no questions asked. Over the next few days, I began to play a role. The doting husband. The playful father. I smiled more than usual. I brought home flowers. I even booked a dinner reservation for 2 at her favorite restaurant. Melissa, ever the actress, played right back. She even told her friends how sweet I was being lately. But beneath the surface, I watched every move. Every glance at her phone. Every secretive giggle. Every quick trip out for groceries. I watched her like an investor watching a stock he knows is about to crash. When the DNA kit arrived, I waited until the kids were asleep. I slipped into their room and gently collected strands of hair from their brushes. I handled it all carefully as instructed. I sealed everything and mailed it the next morning on my way to work. I didn't sleep much after that. Every night, I lay in bed beside her, listening to her breathe, wondering how many lies she whispered in her sleep that I couldn't hear, wondering how long she'd planned this, wondering if there were signs I missed, or if I just didn't want to see them. The results arrived on a Thursday afternoon. I was in my office. I opened the email slowly, my hands cold despite the heat outside. My stomach tightened as I read the words, probability of paternity, 0%. For both children. The room blurred around me. My entire identity as a father dissolved in that moment. They were not mine. Not biologically. Not by any strand of DNA. But they still called me Dad. They still ran into my arms. They still believed I was their hero. I closed the laptop and stared at the wall, feeling every heartbeat like a gunshot in my chest. But then, slowly, I sat up straight. I wiped my face. I looked into the mirror, and I said to myself, this is not how your story ends. The day after the DNA results came in, the world kept moving like nothing happened. Birds still chirped. Traffic still backed up on the highway. Melissa still kissed my cheek and told me to have a great day. But inside me, something had shifted permanently. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a man standing inside a burning house, pretending everything was fine while secretly mapping every escape route. I wasn't interested in reacting. I was interested in erasing her comfort and ensuring every smile she gave me from this moment on would only feed my strategy. I went to work like normal, but I couldn't focus. I stared at my laptop while spreadsheets blinked back at me. Eric's name appeared on 2 of the company's supplier contracts. I remembered how I helped him build his first contracting business years ago, back when he was broke and crashing on our couch after a bad breakup. Back then, Melissa said, help him. He's like family. Turns out she meant that literally. I minimized the screen and stared at my office window. The betrayal wasn't just marital, it was layered, surgical, and fully intentional. But I was done playing victim. I needed to know everything. And fast. By the end of the day, I had a burner phone in my pocket and a silent tracker slipped under Melissa's car bumper. I told my assistant I needed to work from home more over the next few weeks, family reasons. She nodded without asking questions. Meanwhile, the private investigator I'd hired sent me his first report. Melissa had made 3 trips in the last week to an apartment building on the other side of town, an address that wasn't listed on any of our shared documents. He said she stayed there for at least 2 hours each time. The building's resident listed under that unit? Eric Marshall. I sat in the garage that night, engine off, door closed, and let the dark wrap around me. It wasn't grief I felt anymore. It was rage wearing patience like a tailored suit. The way Melissa looked at me lately, like she was doing me a favor by staying. The way she made snide comments during dinner, you're always so tired, or maybe if you were more present with the kids. Every word now echoed differently. It wasn't critique. It was grooming. She'd been conditioning me to question myself, while she wove a lie so deep it had a zip code. Back in the house, dinner was waiting, spaghetti, garlic bread, salad, a smile. Melissa was good at pretending. Too good. The kids sat across the table laughing about school, and I joined them, acting like nothing in the world was off. I even complimented the meal, watching her eyes light up like she'd earned a reward. See? You're smiling again, she said, touching my hand. I nodded, gently squeezing hers back. Yeah, I replied. Feels like things are starting to make sense again. And they were, just not in the way she imagined. That night, while she slept beside me, I opened the secure folder on my phone and listened to the audio my PI had recorded earlier that day. Melissa and Eric laughing on his balcony. Her saying things like, he still thinks I'm loyal. By the time he finds out, I'll be gone and I'll have half of everything. Eric's voice. It's only a matter of time. Just get him to start the divorce process. Be nice. Soften him. I paused the audio and stared at the ceiling. She wasn't just cheating. She was building an exit strategy funded by my life's work. The next morning, I looked in the mirror and smiled at my own reflection. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of grin that comes when a man finally accepts the truth and lets go of what he can't control. I knew what I had to do. I contacted a discreet lawyer who specialized in asset protection and legacy preservation. Within a week, I began setting up a new trust under my mother's name. I started transferring property titles. Not in one go, but little by little, cloaked beneath standard documentation and paperwork she'd never questioned. She never paid attention to details anyway. That was my job. To keep Melissa distracted, I leaned into her fantasy. I bought her a designer bag she'd been eyeing. I planned a spa day for her and her friends. I even told her I was considering taking a break from work to reconnect with the family. She ate it all up like cake. Every day she believed I was softening was another day I got closer to sealing every door behind her. The PI kept updating me with photos and timestamps. Eric's apartment. Cash withdrawals. A hidden credit card. She was preparing for her escape. But what she didn't know was I was preparing the fallout. Then one night, something unexpected happened. My oldest, Mason, came to my office and said, "Dad, can I talk to you?" I nodded. He looked nervous. "Mom said if you and her ever split, we'd probably go live with Uncle Eric. Is that true?" My heart stopped. I kept my voice calm and said, "Why do you ask?" He shrugged. "I heard her talking on the phone. I don't want to live with him. He's weird." I hugged him tight, hiding the storm that surged through me. Even the kids were pawns in her exit plan. That was the moment I decided there'd be no mercy. Eric had always been around. He was the kind of man who slid into your life under the pretense of friendship and made himself comfortable before you realized how deep his roots had gone. I met him during a housing development project 10 years ago. Back then, he was fresh off a failed startup and needed work. I saw potential in him. He was rough around the edges, but had charm, charisma, and enough desperation to say yes to anything. I took him in, gave him a role in my company, let him crash in our guest room for 6 months. I even gave him a second chance when he stole from a project fund and returned it the next day, begging for forgiveness. Melissa was the one who convinced me to keep him around. "He's family now," she'd said, with a soft smile. I should have known then. The PI sent me a full report that morning. Melissa had been visiting Eric's apartment weekly, but what made my stomach turn wasn't the frequency, it was the photos. Her in workout clothes, carrying groceries into his place. Her leaving late at night in one of my old hoodies. Her kissing him in the parking lot with the kind of affection she used to save for me. There was no shame. No hesitation. The date stamps showed these visits went back nearly a year. The betrayal wasn't new. It had just taken me this long to see the rot beneath the surface. I stared at a photo of Eric holding my daughter's hand as they entered a shopping mall together. My daughter. And that's when something in me hardened beyond repair. I started reviewing every financial record Eric had ever touched within my company. I discovered discrepancies. Small, consistent amounts missing over time. Misreported expenses. Dubious supplier agreements. I had my accountant dig deeper. Together, we uncovered a shell company that Eric had created, registered under a different name but receiving monthly payments from my business accounts. Melissa had signed off on some of them as my proxy while I was away on a business trip. They weren't just sleeping together. They were siphoning my livelihood while laughing in my house, eating my food, sitting at my table. They had turned me into a walking bank account. That night, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the framed photos on the wall. There was one from a family trip to Florida, Melissa in a sundress, me holding both kids, and Eric sitting beside us with a grin that now looked like a mask. I had trusted him with everything, my home, my children, my business. And he had taken it all and spit in my face behind his smile. I reached for the photo frame, stared at it, then calmly removed it from the wall and placed it face down on the table. That picture had been a lie, but the truth was now my weapon. Melissa started acting bolder in the days that followed. She suggested we sell one of the rental properties to free up cash. I agreed, smiling, then immediately transferred the deed to my mother and marked it as a private family asset. She also began asking more questions about our business. What happens to everything if something happens to you? She asked over dinner, twirling spaghetti on her fork like it was any other night. "You mean if I died?" I replied. She gave a nervous laugh. "I'm just curious. It's smart to plan these things." I told her not to worry. I was planning everything. Every last detail. I began reaching out to legal experts under false names. I needed airtight protection, not just from her lies, but from any legal trap she was preparing. I knew what she was after. She thought once she filed for divorce, she'd walk away with half. She had no idea I was rewriting the rules behind her back. She had no idea I was the one preparing for the endgame, not her. I started planting seeds with my lawyer to file for divorce on grounds of infidelity and financial misconduct. I had audio. I had bank records. I had visual proof. And soon, I would have her cornered. The next weekend, we attended a neighborhood barbecue. Eric was there. I hadn't seen him face to face since learning the truth. When he walked up to me with his signature grin and said, "Brother, long time," I smiled. I hugged him. I clapped him on the back. I even handed him a beer. And inside, I imagined dragging him by the collar to the ground and asking him how long he planned to wear my life like a costume. But I held it together. He joked about our college days. Melissa laughed beside him. I looked at both of them and laughed too, because the day of reckoning was no longer a question. It was scheduled. That night, I watched Melissa sleep again. It struck me how peaceful she looked, how undeserving of that peace she really was. I thought about the first time I told her I loved her, how her eyes lit up, how she'd reached for my hand. I remembered our wedding day, the rain, the kiss, the promise. But I also remembered something else, the way her voice sounded on that phone call. He still thinks those kids are his. That voice wasn't the woman I married. That was a stranger. And I was done sleeping beside a stranger. They say betrayal hardens a man, but what they don't tell you is how much strength it takes to keep bleeding in front of your betrayer without flinching. That's what I did for weeks. Woke up beside Melissa, cooked breakfast, played with the kids, and kissed her forehead like I wasn't quietly tearing our world apart behind the scenes. The mask I wore became second nature. Every soft smile, every nod, every touch of her hand was a lie, a performance designed to buy me time. And I played the part so well, she believed every second of it. During dinner, I'd compliment her meals. I even booked a couple's spa day just to keep her convinced that I was still the doting fool she believed I was. Meanwhile, my lawyer and I were finishing the paperwork to transfer every property I owned into my mother's name. Each house, each asset, each investment. Melissa was still living under the illusion that everything was marital property. But she didn't know I had predated the transfers in a trust one created 2 years ago, one I never activated until now. She couldn't claim what no longer belonged to me. I had to smile through so many insults. Subtle ones. Like when she said, "Maybe you should let Eric handle some of the business deals. He's quicker with people." Or when she joked to her sister that Jordan's losing touch, he's too old school. Each word cut deep, but I filed them away. Every comment, every recorded call, every shady bank transaction. My PI was still feeding me new dirt. I learned that Melissa had visited a second lawyer, this one with expertise in divorce settlements. She wasn't just having an affair, she was building a strategy to gut me clean and vanish. But she didn't realize I was 10 moves ahead. I orchestrated a false confession one night. I told Melissa I'd been stressed about work, worried about losing clients, maybe even going bankrupt. She paused, just briefly, but long enough for me to see the flicker of opportunity spark in her eyes. "Don't worry, babe," she said. "We'll figure it out together." She even rubbed my shoulders and offered to manage the household accounts again. That was the confirmation I needed. She smelled weakness and thought it was her opening. But I had already frozen the joint accounts. I had closed credit cards. She just hadn't realized it yet because the bills were still being paid from a backup fund I created under my mother's name. I watched her every day like a scientist observing a subject. Her movements were calculated, but her arrogance made her sloppy. She began dropping Eric's name more often in conversations, as if preparing me for the new normal she'd eventually unveil. She joked about how lucky we were to have a friend like him. Once, I caught her staring at a photo of the kids with a strange look, almost like guilt, but it vanished when she saw me watching. Melissa wasn't just planning to leave. She was planning to rewrite the story so that I'd be the villain. And that was the part one couldn't let happen. My mother called one afternoon, worried. "Are you okay, Jordan? You sound detached." I assured her I was fine, but she pressed further. "What's going on between you two?" I paused for a long time. Then I said, "Nothing you need to worry about yet, Mom. But if I ever ask you to sign something, just trust me and do it." She hesitated, then said, "Okay." That's how I knew I had to finish this without anyone else getting caught in the wreckage. I needed to isolate the cancer and cut it out surgically. I started putting together the presentation. It felt absurd, In a way, designing a PowerPoint about your own betrayal. But I needed it. I needed everyone who ever saw Melissa as a sweet, smiling wife to see the truth. I pulled up text logs, bank statements, photos, call transcripts. I organized them into folders. Financial theft, infidelity evidence, surveillance logs, legal motive. Each piece of evidence was a bullet I would fire in one carefully aimed shot. But I wasn't ready to pull the trigger. Not yet. Timing was everything. And her birthday was just around the corner. Melissa had been planning her birthday like a royal gala. Not large, just intimate, she said. Close friends, a few relatives, Eric of course. She had no idea that I was planning something far more memorable. I just want something meaningful this year, she told me while sipping wine in our backyard. I nodded. You'll definitely remember it, I replied. And I meant it. The thought of her face when the truth exploded in front of her inner circle played in my mind like a movie I couldn't stop watching. It was the one thing that made pretending bearable. I gave her everything she wanted in the weeks leading up to that day. I even took her shopping. I laughed at her jokes. I watched her twirl in new dresses and asked which color made her feel most beautiful. I listened as she told her friend over the phone that she finally had Jordan where she wanted him. Every fake moment fed her confidence. Every staged smile bought me one more inch of control. She didn't know I had already changed the locks on the beach house, or that the final document I filed that week made her ineligible for spousal support. She thought she had time. She thought she had power. But all she had was a countdown. And the clock was almost at zero. As the final week before Melissa's birthday crept in, I could feel the tension humming beneath my skin like a low electric current. Every moment we spent together felt like the quiet before a storm, still, heavy, thick with a weight only I could feel. I walked through the house as if it were a stage set, and I was the only one who knew the script was about to flip. Melissa had no clue. She was busy finalizing the guest list, fussing over the cake flavor, and picking the perfect dress. All the while, I was finalizing documents, editing a presentation, and preparing a controlled demolition of our life, one that would happen in front of the people she most wanted to impress. I had already moved the final property into my mother's name. Quietly, without noise, without confrontation. Even the vacation home Melissa thought we would retire in, gone. The only thing she technically still had access to was the family SUV, and that was only because I hadn't gotten around to transferring the lease. It felt surreal sometimes, sitting across from her at dinner while she beamed about how this year just feels lucky. I'd smile, nod, toast to her birthday, and think, your luck ends the second the lights dim and the screen turns on. I was strategic about the guest list. I nudged her subtly toward inviting certain people. Her boss, her cousin Mia, two of our old friends from college, and of course, Eric. The idea was to fill the room with those who respected her and believed she had the perfect marriage. I wanted the fall to be long and hard. And I wanted witnesses. My lawyer said I was treading a fine line, that public shaming could backfire in divorce court. But I wasn't aiming for sympathy from a judge. I was aiming to strip away every illusion she'd cloaked herself in. And I had more than enough proof to justify every action. The tech guy I'd hired, same guy who helped secure our company's cloud servers, owed me a favor. I told him I needed a private stream set up, one that would let me project a video compilation during the party without tipping Melissa off. He built me a timed sequence. The moment I clicked a single file, it would play a loop of evidence, voice recordings, photos, and finally, a full-screen PDF of the DNA test results. I tested it twice in my office, and both times it worked flawlessly. I watched the clips alone, letting them sting one last time before using them as weapons. I spent that final night rehearsing what I would say. I didn't want it to sound bitter. I didn't want to scream or make a scene. I wanted to be calm, cold, measured. I wanted every word to slice clean, not crash loud. I practiced the speech while looking in the mirror, studying my reflection the way a man studies a battlefield before walking into it. Happy birthday, Melissa, I whispered to the mirror. 14 years, 2 children, and one masterfully crafted lie. And I thank you. Because now I see everything. I paused. I didn't need to say much more. The evidence would do the talking. The morning of the party, Melissa was buzzing with energy. She twirled around the kitchen in a robe, humming to herself. Tonight's going to be so special, she said, running her fingers through my hair as I drank my coffee. I can feel it. I smiled into my cup and replied, it's going to be unforgettable. And it would be. Not for the reasons she imagined. I went through the motions that day like a ghost trapped in a memory. I helped the caterers set up, arranged the chairs, double-checked the guest tags, and made sure the projector cable was hidden just right. I even texted Eric and said, can't wait to see you, man. Been too long. The house filled with laughter and chatter. By 6 p.m. friends arrived with wine, Melissa's co-workers brought flowers, and Eric strolled in wearing one of his slick button-downs, arms wide for a hug. I gave him one. A long one. The kind that makes a man relax. I poured him a drink myself and toasted to good friends and better days ahead. Melissa looked radiant, silver dress, soft curls, glowing with confidence. She kissed my cheek in front of everyone and whispered, thank you for making this so perfect. I kissed her back. You're welcome. Now let's make it really unforgettable. Around 7:15 p.m., someone clinked their glass and said, speech. Speech. Melissa laughed and pointed at me. Come on, Jordan, she said, her eyes bright with joy. Tell everyone how much you love me. I stepped up, holding my glass. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. I took a deep breath and smiled at the crowd. Thank you all for coming. It means a lot to see so many faces who've been a part of our lives. 14 years of marriage is a journey, full of joy, full of lessons, and full of truths we sometimes ignore until we can't anymore. A few people chuckled nervously. Melissa's smile twitched. I kept going. This year, I learned something that changed me. Something painful, but also freeing. I turned slightly, reaching for the remote. And instead of telling you, I thought I'd show you. I clicked the button. The lights dimmed. The screen came to life. And in that silence, everything I had carried alone for weeks finally had a voice. Melissa turned to look. And the first photo on screen was of her kissing Eric in a parking lot at night. The room went silent like a switch had been flipped. The photo froze time, the image of Melissa and Eric kissing in the glow of a street lamp, unmistakably close, unquestionably intimate. Gasps rippled through the guests. One of Melissa's co-workers dropped her wine glass. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, the remote in one hand, watching my wife's face morph from confusion to horror. She looked around, as if begging someone to tell her this was a prank. But the next slide hit before she could catch her breath. Bank statements, transactions flowing out of our joint account into Eric's fake business, month after month. Melissa's lips parted but no sound came out. Then her cousin Mia stood up slowly from her seat, whispering something to her husband. My lawyer had warned me that this would be the moment she might break down or explode. I had prepared for both. But what I saw instead was worse than either. She tried to laugh. This isn't funny, Jordan, she said, voice shaking. Turn it off. But I didn't. The next slide was an audio clip. Her voice, clear and smug, speaking to Eric. By the time he figures it out, I'll be long gone, with half his assets. He's so gullible, he'd probably thank me on the way out. The laughter in the room died completely. Even Eric, who had been standing near the patio door, froze. His drink hung in midair, untouched. His confidence vanished like a shadow at dawn. I turned the volume up slightly so no one could miss what came next. Melissa describing how she manipulated me, how the kids weren't mine, how she was just waiting for the right time to bounce. And then, as if choreographed for cruelty, the final slide, the PDF scan of the DNA results. Probability of paternity, 0%. For both children. I let the image linger on screen. I looked at her. I didn't blink. Her legs gave way, and she stumbled back into the wall, hand clutching the table behind her. You're disgusting, she hissed at me. You ruined everything. I stepped forward, keeping my voice calm. No, Melissa. You ruined everything. I just stopped protecting your version of the truth. Eric finally spoke. Man, this is out of line. We should take this private. I turned to him and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, private? Like the bank account you opened in a fake name? Or the house you bought with my money? A new wave of murmurs swept the room. Melissa's boss stood up and said quietly, I think we should leave. Several others followed. The party dissolved faster than it had assembled. Guests shuffled toward the door in stunned silence, some muttering apologies, others staring at Melissa like they were seeing her for the first time. She tried to chase after Mia, grabbing her wrist. You believe me, right? He's exaggerating. Mia pulled her hand away. I don't know who you are. That line cut deeper than anything I could have said myself. And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't just losing her marriage. She was losing her audience. When the last guest left and the door closed behind them, the silence in the room felt like smoke after an explosion, thick, choking, and impossible to ignore. Melissa turned to me with a face full of fury and desperation. You think this makes you strong? You humiliated me. You made a circus out of our lives. I stepped closer, keeping my voice even. No, I ended the circus you created. I just made sure everyone saw the tent collapse. She reached for my arm, but I pulled away. Don't, I said. This performance is over. You can stop acting now. She tried to regain control. Fine. You want a divorce? You'll pay for this. I'll take you for everything. I cut her off. Everything? You mean the properties that no longer belong to me? The accounts you can't access? The trust that protects my business? There's nothing left for you to take, Melissa. You've already taken enough. She looked stunned. Lost. You transferred everything? I nodded. 2 months ago, right after the DNA results came in. I knew exactly what you tried to do. So I made sure you'd walk away with exactly what you brought into this marriage. Nothing. She stood in silence, jaw trembling. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. I walked past her to the dining table, pulled out a manila folder, and laid it down. Your copy of the divorce papers. Already filed. You'll be served officially in the morning, but I thought I'd give you an early birthday present. She opened the folder with shaking hands. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, then darted back to me. You're serious? I nodded. I've never been more serious in my life. Then I turned, walked upstairs, and left her standing alone in the ruins of the life she thought she controlled. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was broken, but because I finally wasn't. I lay on the guest room bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of a house no longer filled with lies. My phone buzzed once, an unknown number. I didn't answer. I had nothing left to explain, and nothing left to hide. I thought about the kids, about how I'd break the truth to them gently, carefully. They were innocent. I would always care for them, even if they weren't mine by blood. But Melissa? She'd written her ending with her own pen. Morning came quietly, but the air felt different, lighter. For the first time in weeks, I woke up without dread sitting on my chest. I brewed coffee in silence and stood by the window, watching the sun stretch across the lawn like it was cleansing everything that had gone rotten. I heard Melissa stirring upstairs, her footsteps slower, unsure. She didn't come down. The party was over. The mask had fallen. There were no more games to play. The truth was out, and now we had to live in the aftermath of it. But only one of us had a plan for that. By mid-morning, there was a knock at the door. Melissa stood behind me in her robe, asking who it was. The sheriff, I replied calmly. She froze. Her hand dropped to her side like something had just broken inside her. When I opened the door, the officer greeted me and handed over the official divorce notice. Melissa stepped back, hugging herself. Is this really happening? She whispered. This is cruel, Jordan. This is public annihilation. I turned to her. You think I wanted this? You lit the match. I just stopped pretending not to see the fire. As the officer left, she collapsed on the living room couch, silent, eyes wide and unfocused. I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered every moment she manipulated me. Every lie she spun while smiling at my face, while touching my hand, while holding the kids like nothing in the world was wrong. She didn't deserve pity. She deserved consequences. I sat across from her, and after a long silence, said, You should start packing. The house is no longer legally mine. It's in my mother's name. She wants it empty by the weekend. Melissa looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. You're kicking me out? She asked, voice trembling. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. Maybe Eric has a couch. Or maybe he's busy explaining to his wife how he used her name to help siphon funds out of my business. Did I mention I spoke with her? Her face drained of color. You didn't. I nodded. She'll be filing soon. Looks like you're not the only one facing a divorce this week. Melissa covered her face with her hands and let out a sound I couldn't quite define, part sob, part scream. But it didn't move me. That part of me was gone. Later that afternoon, my attorney called to confirm everything had been processed. The assets were locked. The court filing included evidence of adultery, financial misconduct, and willful deception. Legally, Melissa had no claim to anything. The kids would require a separate conversation with the judge, but I had already prepared a statement asking for joint custody, not because I wanted revenge, but because I loved them. No matter what the test said, they were mine in every way that mattered. I wouldn't punish them for their mother's decisions. I would protect them, even if I couldn't protect the lie we once lived in. Eric, on the other hand, had started unraveling. I got an anonymous email from his office assistant. A forwarded chain of messages where he panicked, begging Melissa to fix it, saying, "Jordan's going nuclear. We're going to lose everything." He had been stealing from my company for years, hiding behind fake vendors, padded invoices, and shady subcontractors. I reported the findings to the authorities with documented proof. A case was opened. Charges were pending. I didn't need to scream for revenge. I just let the truth do its job. Quiet justice. The kind that doesn't make noise. It just shows up. The next morning, Melissa's cousin Mia returned to pick up a few things she'd left during the party. She didn't even look at Melissa when she walked in. Just grabbed her jacket, offered me a sympathetic nod, and said, "Good luck, Jordan. If you need a witness for anything, I'm here." That told me everything I needed to know. Melissa had lost more than just a marriage. She'd lost her credibility, her circle, her illusion of control. She sat on the stairs as Mia left, holding her phone like she was waiting for someone to rescue her. But there were no messages, no calls, no one left to fool. That night, I watched her pack the first box. Slowly, quietly. She looked at the framed photos on the wall like they belonged to a stranger. At one point, she asked, "Do you really think I'm a monster?" I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. She knew what she had done. She just didn't expect the consequences to be real. For years, she lived with the confidence of someone who believed they could outsmart the truth. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. It waits. And when it returns, it takes everything with it. When she left on Sunday, she didn't say goodbye. She didn't slam the door. She just walked out with a suitcase, the same way she had walked into my life years ago, with the air of someone chasing something. Only this time, there was nothing waiting for her on the other side. Just silence. Just fallout. Just the pieces of a game she thought she could rig forever. I stood at the top of the stairs and watched the car drive away. And for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Peace. A month passed. Then another. The house was quiet again, but not hollow. The absence of deception had its own kind of music, soft, honest, unthreatening. I repainted the bedroom, switched the furniture, removed every framed photo that didn't feel real anymore. The kids spent time with me on weekends, and we settled into a rhythm. They asked questions, gentle at first, then deeper. "Why did Mom leave? Are we going to be okay?" I answered with patience, never venom. "Sometimes people lie," I told them. "But the truth always finds its way through. And yes, we're going to be okay." Melissa tried to contact me in the early weeks. Voicemails, long texts, one half-hearted apology disguised as a rant. I didn't answer. She wasn't reaching out for closure. She was reaching out because the walls had closed in and she couldn't find a door. Eric had been arrested after one of his dummy companies got flagged in a federal audit. He cut a deal, of course, but in exchange, he gave up everything he had left. The last I heard, he'd moved back in with his mother in Ohio and was banned from doing business in the state for 5 years. Karma doesn't always knock. Sometimes it just lets the roof cave in. I thought that was the end of it. I was ready to move on completely, focus on the kids, rebuild from the inside out. Then one Tuesday morning, I got the letter. A plain white envelope, no return address, hand-delivered to my office by a courier. I opened it slowly. It was from Melissa. I recognized her handwriting immediately. It was shaky, less refined than I remembered. The letter started soft, like she was afraid the paper itself might catch fire. She said she had time to reflect, that she regretted what she did, that she missed the life we built. And then came the sentence that made me drop the letter for a moment. "I'm pregnant, and it's yours." I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Pregnant. Hers. Mine? My mind flashed back to something I had almost forgotten, something I never told her about. A quiet trip to a clinic nearly a year ago. A decision made after long talks with my doctor. A vasectomy. I didn't tell Melissa. Not because I didn't trust her back then. I still believed I could fix things. But because I didn't want more children in a house already aching from cracks I couldn't explain. I never told her. She never knew. So now, reading that claim, I didn't feel fear. I felt something closer to calm clarity. I picked the letter back up and kept reading. She wrote about struggling to find a place to stay. How she couldn't go back to her parents. They'd cut her off after the party. How Eric had turned on her when the heat came. She claimed she wanted a co-parent to start fresh. Maybe we could rebuild something, even if just as friends. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. I didn't need to respond. The truth would reveal itself soon enough, just like it always had. That weekend, I took the kids to the lake. It was warm, peaceful. Mason tried fishing while Lila built a sandcastle by the water. I watched them, proud and a little heartbroken at once. They weren't mine by DNA, but they were mine in every way that mattered. I taught Mason how to ride a bike. I held Lila the first time she had an asthma attack and thought the world was ending. I'd kissed scraped knees, helped with math homework, read bedtime stories. Biology didn't raise them. I did. And I would keep doing it, no matter what. That night, as they slept in their rooms, I sat on the porch, sipping tea, wrapped in a blanket. I thought about forgiveness, not for her, but for myself. For staying too long. For doubting my instincts. For letting love blind me into silence. I forgave the man I was, because he didn't know better. But the man I had become, he knew exactly where the line was. And he would never cross it again. Weeks later, I received another letter. This time, it wasn't from Melissa, it was from a law firm. She was requesting mediation. I declined. Let the courts handle it. I had no more speeches, no more screens, no more surprises. I had given her a front row seat to the collapse she built with her own hands. I didn't need to give her anything else. Not my words. Not my energy. Not another second of my life. In time, the weight faded. My mornings were mine again. The house echoed with real laughter. I took up cooking, started running again. Even reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen in years. And when people asked how I was doing, I told them the truth. I'm free. If this story kept you hooked till the end, don't forget to hit the like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories that expose betrayal, celebrate justice, and remind us all of the strength in silence. See you soon in our next story.